Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is a radio and podcast host, paranormal investigator, and author. He has been seen on shows such as The Holzer Files, Ghosts of Devils Perch, Curse of Lizzy Borden, and many more. His new book, Theater of the Mind, is now available. Please welcome Dave Schrader back to Epic Realms. How you doing, Dave?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me again.
Tell us about the charity you were working on. This is a reversal. I was talking to you earlier. This is a reversal. Last time I did a charity and was clean shaven, and now you're clean shaven for a charity. Tell us about the charity and what you were raising funds for.
Yeah, we were out at the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash that just took place this last weekend. And it's a great little event. They do what they call Christmas in July. So there are donations you can make that'll go to a children's charity. So if you want to drop off toys, they're going to go to kids that are in need at Christmas time. Then all the ticket sales from the event go to help Wounded Warriors Project in Pennsylvania, which is for veterans that were wounded during their service. And then they also raise money for Hero for Hire. And while we were there, Daniel Class, who I'm sure you're probably familiar with, his daughter is currently battling it well, cancer. And we were trying to raise some money for her. So we did a night of celebrity bartending. So we had 4 different little bars going up around. It was John Zaffis and I against Brian and Rochelle from Ghost Hunters, and we had the guy dressed like Batman over in the corner, all ripped and wearing just his cowl and at the bottoms of his uniform. So we were up against stiff competition, literally. And we ended up raising, I think, $3,000 in tip money for that. And then when I walked outside to get some fresh air, a couple of the guys were shaving their heads for the charity and people were making donations. So they said, well, let's shave Dave's head. Oh, never mind. And I said, well, if people want to donate money, I'll shave my goatee. So we raised another $200, and I had them shave my goatee for me.
That's awesome. That's great. I love that you
Yeah.
do so many charities throughout the year, just constantly giving, and that's one of the things that I and so many people that are part of your audience love about you is the amount of giving that you do for charities and the selflessness that you give out. And I don't think you get enough credit for that. And so I just want to say thank you so much for everything you do for all those charities and all the people that need help out there, even when it comes down to like the well wishes and prayers and thoughts for people that you put out on your social medias. So it's really awesome. And that's a great thing. That's amazing. Thank you so much for all that.
Yeah. Well, and I don't do it for the accolades or the
I know you
pats on
don't.
the,
That's why I'm
I
giving them to
yeah,
you anyhow.
thank you. Yeah, I just, I figure I've got a platform, and whether I've got one person listen or a million people listening, why not try to do something good with the time that we share together? And from time to time, let's talk about things that we can do to make a difference and change people and change lives. So that's what I've done all along.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you.
Last time you were on this show, you were talking about an upcoming event. You were going to go to Egypt. This is a little bit ago now.
Yeah,
How
quite a
was
while
that
ago.
Egypt trip? And kind of tell us a little bit about that trip and maybe some other trips that you've done since then.
Yeah, last year was a busy one. I did a trip to England, 2 trips to England, and a trip to Egypt, and it was bonkers. Just amazing times. I mean, we were getting access to the Great Pyramids. We got to go in with our small group of about 20 and got to investigate King Tut's tomb all by ourselves.
Yeah.
So we went in and photographed and videoed and did some EVP work. And it was just really amazing to be in these historic sites and get to just kind of breathe in that rarefied air of these historic locations. And, we were in Queen Nefertari's uh, uh, grave. I can't think of the word. I'm looking
Tomb
and
chamber.
yeah, King Tut and a couple other players along the line, and got to see the Sphinx up close. So this was a dream come true.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I used to go to the local travel agency, and every now and again at the end of the month, they'd pull down travel posters and put up new ones. And they would give me posters. So I had one for England, one for Australia, one for France, and one for Egypt. And now I've checked all those off my box. So I've had a chance to visit many different countries, and I got to see all 4 of the major ones I really wanted to see as a kid. So it's pretty exciting. And to get to go there, not only just for a visit, but to get to go see the history and the mysteries
Yeah.
and be a part of investigations at historic sites. That's I'm a very
And
blessed.
bringing people along with you, people that like want to do investigations and like-minded people.
Yeah.
And that's really awesome and super cool. And you do a lot of those events. You do a lot of conventions and things like that. And you invite people to come and join. You're doing a Palmer House event coming up, right?
Yeah, at the
And
Palmer
that's, I
House.
think it's sold out, but let's talk about what's your tie to the Palmer House?
Well, the Palmer House Hotel in Sauk Center, Minnesota, not the other famous Palmer House Hotel in Chicago, but it's just this great little homespun hotel. It's a boutique hotel that was made, I think, in 1901, but the original hotel had been there for 50 or 60 years before that and then burned to the ground, and they raised the new hotel. So it used to be the Sauk Center Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it burned down, they created the Palmer House Hotel. And it's awesome. It's haunted. It's got a creepy vibe to it, but it's not scary. There's nothing
Yeah,
dangerous, demonic, or deadly there. But it can be unnerving at times. And I've been going there now for the better part of 16 years.
yeah,
And I probably 2, 3 times a year, and I've maybe only been let down maybe 2 or 3 times in all of that.
right.
So, and by let down, I just mean it was quieter than normal.
But there's still stuff going on because there's always
Oh,
everybody I know who's gone there now has a story about the Palmer House. Oh, I went there to to debunk it, and then they come back like, man, ghosts are that's real. It's that
yeah.
stuff's real. It's like, well, what do you expect? Like the Palmer House is, especially in Minnesota, is fairly well known. If you're in the paranormal scene in Minnesota, like the Palmer House is the be all end all as far as I'm concerned. So,
And what was funny, I was there earlier this year
mm-hmm,
at the Palmer House doing a couple of events, and I did one with Dalen Spratt from the Ghost Brothers. And there's a local production company that I've been working with. We're filming a little project we're hoping to sell and get out on TV by 2025.
awesome.
And they came to film some of what I do. And we went down, the night before everybody arrived to do a little private ghost hunt. It was just me and the owner and the film crew, and we were down in the basement of the Palmer House and getting live real time EVP, and it was freaking the camera crew out and the sound guy, and there were times he could hear the whispers while I was recording the EVP through the microphone in the headset. So he was really unnerved by it, and then it was so exciting to hear guys that really had no belief in the paranormal. This is just a gig for them,
Yeah.
and they end up just absolute believers. And then I found out that a bunch of the crew rented the hotel to go back and visit and just hang out for an entire weekend and investigate themselves and do some stuff. So that was pretty neat.
That is really neat. When you're doing some of the shows that you've done, you talk about
Mm-hmm.
the crew and they've got the headsets, and I know you've talked about this in the past how a lot of the crew members will have interactions. For some of
Mm-hmm.
those shows, do you have like the tried and true, like this is a person who goes on a lot of paranormal shows and they're kind of like they understand, as opposed to people that are like, a rotating crew, every show has a different crew and they don't know.
Well, most of like when I did the Holzer Files and Ghosts of Devils Perch, the Holzer Files, all the casting or the crew, I should say, in production, had worked on shows like Dead Files and Ghost Adventures and a couple of the other shows, but they weren't all together. They just, you piecemeal it in between
Yeah.
seasons. You
Yeah.
build your production team, and there were some really cool moments that we had. We were at a house in Metuchen, and we were doing our baseline investigation and having some weird activity, and everybody was outside the house, and I was sitting. It was a very cold night, and I'm sitting in front of this big bank of computer screens at our little HQ outside, and everybody's kind of doing their thing and getting ready. We're going to go do this and film that. And as I'm watching the cameras live, all of a sudden you see the back door, and it's kind of got one of those sheer curtains hanging over it. You see what looks like something walk through it, and you see a face. And I'm like, oh my God, did you guys see that? And they're like, what? And of course, nobody's paying attention.
Yeah.
And I go, something just walked through that door. And the directors are kind of giving me the side eye. And the one camera guy goes, well, I've got it rolling. We can go back and check it. I'm like, yes. And you can see everybody's kind of piqued curiosity. And I'm like, this was crazy. Because legitimately, you see what looks like a head go right through the curtain,
Yeah.
and we play it back, and all of these guys who had worked on other paranormal shows flipped out. They're like, all the years I've done this, I've never seen something like that in my entire life. That was so cool. And it was a moment we weren't even trying for. There was nobody left in the house. We were all outside, and the cameras were just rolling inside when we captured that.
There's so many cool little stories that you always seem to come up with, you and other people in the industry, that like you hear some of the stories repeatedly, but every once in a while there's little tidbits, little stories like that where the crew had something going on. That's one of the reasons I like would have wanted to ask you about the crew, because usually those are the stories people don't always hear about. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you see they'll pan to the crew member who's freaking out about whatever, but you know because there's so much time recorded that there's a lot of stuff that happened, a lot of interactions that the crew had that you just don't see the light of day, except for unless you were there. So it's always cool to hear those kinds of
Right.
stories.
Because sometimes, it's, and I always said, I want my cameraman to be a part of this.
Yeah.
So my director ended up being my camera guy for Holzer Files. He was kind of my dedicated camera guy. And he would be the kind I could talk to because Shane's off on his own, Cindy's off on her own. Shane's working with his technology, Cindy's talking to the dead, and I'm just by myself with, maybe a recorder. So when something's happening, I have no one to react to except for my camera guy. And I'd be like, whoa, did you hear that? And I'd get the nod of the camera, and then we'd play back the EVP. And sometimes it really unsettled my director. And then I had another great cameraman on there too, Rob Toth, who has been a big part of Dead Files and many other shows. And I loved working with, I had two Robs, Rob Safi and Rob Toth as my main camera guys. And there were a lot of times we'd hear stuff. We were in one house, the Ayers Allen house, I think it was,
Okay.
and we were having all kinds of really weird activity taking place, and we were getting set to have this moment where our team is going to rejoin and kind of talk about what's been going on. Everybody is in front of the camera or outside. The sound guy's tucked around the corner, and we're standing there, and clear as day from the room behind the camera guy, you hear footsteps on the wooden floors come walking right up behind him and stop. And we're all staring at him. And he just kind of lifts his head up over the camera, and he slowly turns his head and looks back at us. And he just didn't move the camera, didn't run. He was ready for whatever, but just kept filming us and our reactions to it. And those are great moments that would have been really cool on the show. But then we have to punch something else out that was actually more integral to the story.
Yeah.
So it's tough to make that call.
Yeah, for sure. When you have these people on, whether it's on a show like that, when you have new people on, whether you're going on a tour with newcomers, what is it like
Mm-hmm.
for you? Because I'm assuming, and assumptions being what they are, do you have to teach them some of the ins and outs of doing paranormal investigating and like kind of some of the do's and don'ts as far as that goes when you go on those tours?
Yeah, we try to give everybody a little bit of a, paranormal investigating 101. Here's the basics.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that since the beginning. Just try to make it entertaining and fun, but hopefully that they're learning there
Yeah.
are better ways to do things.
Does that get
So
old for you?
no,
After
because
30 years
I
being explaining the same things, and this is how you
yeah.
do this, and
Well,
protect yourself.
thankfully it's only been 18 years. So I hope to get to 30 years, just 12 more years from now, and then I'll let you know if I'm tired of it. But no, I enjoy it because I like watching the expressions and wonder on their faces as I put out the possibilities of this could happen. You have to be prepared for this.
Yeah.
So don't do this, don't do that, be a part of this, be aware of that. And it never goes old. I think what's funny is for us, the paranormal community, the ones you see on TV and that are out there doing this all the time on the events, sometimes the actual investigation gets a little tedious because we know how boring it can be.
Yeah.
And when it's dragged out and super long and boring and nothing's happening, and you have a 5-hour ghost investigation in the same spot and they just keep rotating in different groups every hour, that can really bear on you. And there's a funny time we were in Virginia City, Nevada, and it was Jeff Belanger and we were over in the jail,
Yeah.
and we were leading the ghost hunt there, and they had like 4 buildings, and every hour they'd bring us a new team, and those teams would break up and go to other locations. And by that like 5th hour, we were out of questions, we were both just exhausted, and we sat down on the floor and we're both looking up at the 2 layers of jail cells because there's one set on top of the other. And all of the people were on the first level of the jail cells when very clearly this full on black shadow figure walked out of one cell, looked at us over the bar, turned, walked down, and went into another cell. And Jeff and I just sat there, and then we slowly turned and looked at each other. And I'm like, "Did you?" And he goes, "Yeah, the guy that just came out and went into." I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Hey, is everybody on the first floor? Yeah, yeah. Is there anybody on the upper floor? Anybody?" So somebody's like, "Well, I'll go up and check." Went up and swept every cell. Nothing. And he's like, "Shouldn't we tell them?" And I'm like, then it's just our story. They might think we're just hedging it to make them go investigate someplace else. And I
Yeah.
said, so this really kind of cool moment for just the 2 of us to witness. But I also try to keep in mind that, this may be your first experience. So, you know, getting an EVP that says get out is super exciting for you. For me, it's like, oh my God, come on, Ghost, say something besides get out, right?
Right.
I mean, I need something a little bit more. So it's always trying to, find that fine line of still being in the moment and excited about this, not necessarily for myself, but for the people that are having it. It's like taking your kids to a zoo. You know what a monkey looks like, you know what a tiger looks like, you know what a bear looks like,
Right.
but there's this kind of giddy excitement as the kids are experiencing it for the first time. And that's
That's
what,
true.
what most of us try to do, is we try to live in that headspace of this is old to us, but it's new to you, and I can't wait to see your reaction when this happens. And
Yeah.
when you're there and you have some skeptical people in your group, and then the skeptics are the one that have the most profound experience, that really is fulfilling.
That's awesome. I love that. I love that. When you're putting together these events, are you doing
Mhm.
all of the organizing and the scheduling and the ticket, all that, or are you going through an organization, or is there a group of you doing those?
I was like the big guy in the field. I did it
Mm-hmm.
from 2006 to I think 2012. I used to do darkness events, and we had, between 200 to 300 people at an event.
Right.
And overall, that's not huge when you think, there are events like, the Penhurst event during the summer, which brings in 5,000 people. But we were in locations like Eastern State Penitentiary, Waverly Hills Sanitarium, Rolling Hills Asylum, the Queen Mary, Stanley Hotel. So there wasn't just nonstop room, plus
Yeah.
we were doing live investigations at night. So we would have large groups of 100 people investigating at night, and we'd be broken up into groups of 20, 25 people that would be separated out. And every hour we'd rotate around, and they'd get to work with all their, favorite paranormal personalities from TV.
Yeah.
And that was just fun to get to do. But I did those for about 6 years, and then it just started getting tougher and tougher to book, because locations were now not obscure little locations. They were, a lot of people were calling on them. So they started jacking prices through the roof and giving us less and less access, but wanting more and more money. And I eventually just stepped back and I let other people host events, and they'll just hire me to be a speaker and
Yeah.
presenter and an MC. And sometimes I'll go on ghost hunts.
It's awesome. You got a lot of events coming up. We'll talk about some of your events coming up later on in the show. You're doing the Paranormal 60 now. You've
Hmm.
got the Paranormal 360.
Yes.
You've got the Mysteries, Mayhem, and Merlot that's part of the Paranormal 60 network. Tell us about some of these shows, how the evolution of these have come about since you've done the Paranormal 60.
Well, I originally began with a show called Darkness Radio,
Yeah.
and we did that for a number of years. And then we moved over to the Jericho Network,
Mm-hmm.
podcast network.
Beyond
So we
Beyond
went
the
from
Darkness, right?
Yeah, we went from terrestrial radio as Darkness Radio over to podcast in Beyond the Darkness. Then we transferred back into Darkness Radio. And then, after doing it for 13, 14 years, I stepped away and turned it over to Tim, my co host and producer, longtime friend, and just stepped away and took a couple months to myself. I had been doing this nonstop for 16 years,
Yeah.
5 nights a week. And then if I was hosting Coast to Coast AM on the weekends, sometimes 7 days a week. And I just got to the point where it's like, for my own mental health, we had just come out of COVID. I did my best to continue to be there and be proactive and entertain people all during COVID. And, I'm just sitting at this event this last week. I was sitting down with John Zaffis, and we were kind of examining the last, you know, boy, the last 6 years have been really tough. Between personal losses and then COVID rolling in, I've probably lost about 30 people in the last 8 years. And that's a lot of people,
Yeah.
a lot of people. And, some of my mom being one of them, and so many great friends. And, it just, you wake up every morning dreading finding out who's going to be gone next. And
Yeah.
John and I were just talking about that. And it's so kind of disheartening, but I needed time off for a while, and I took a couple months, and then I thought, you know what, I can come back a couple times a week and I'll do the Paranormal 60. And my goal was just a once a week or maybe twice a week 60-minute show.
Yeah.
And that's what you basically find Monday nights on my YouTube channel. From 9 to 10 p.m. Central, I do the Paranormal 60, where I usually have a guest or maybe two and talk to them about different subjects and topics. And that's done with a more serious note, but we can have a little fun with it. never disrespectful, always respectful of it, but enjoying leaning into the high strangeness and the absurdity of it.
Yeah.
And then Wednesday, we really embrace the absurdity. We read news stories from around the world, and I've got my little Paranormal 60 news crew. I've
Yeah.
got my three buddies out of Texas, and then my friend Tressa Sweet Tea out of Chicago, who is a comedian, and we share news stories from around the world that have happened in the past 7 days that have to do with ghosts, UFOs, space exploration, lost civilizations, whatever weird stories in the news. And we share them, and we all have a cocktail in hand.
Yeah.
And when somebody stumbles over their story, we all have a drink and have a laugh. And that usually ends up going about 90 minutes long because we're having such a good time
Yeah.
doing it. So those live on my Paranormal 60 YouTube channel. And then
And I love those
recently,
shows, by the way. I love the
thank
news.
you.
It's fun. It's, you get to chuckle and you can tell that you guys are enjoying it and just having a
Yeah.
blast doing it. So
Yeah, it's a great opportunity to work with people I love and that are dear friends, and we all get to, especially during COVID, I just realized, man, I've never felt so isolated in my life.
yeah.
And I realized most of my friends are spread out around the United States. And you just don't always make the time for the friends that you should. And with how many friends I've lost, these guys mean a lot to me. And let's get together once a week and have some laughs. And this is a great way for us to do that. It's, you know, four of us, five of us sitting down, laughing it up and having drinks and just enjoying our time. And that's really been great. And then I've been filling in at a regular radio station, WCCO here in Minnesota, which is a legendary radio station.
Yeah.
I was filling in on regular shows, so it was not paranormal topics. We were talking politics and news of the day and whatever was kind of the buzzwords. And there was a Sunday night spot that they were always doing a rotating host in trying to find the right fit. And I threw my hat in the ring about a month ago. I said, I'd be happy to take that over just to have a regular spot every week that's mine instead of just filling in for everybody else.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, what do you want to talk about? And we went over a couple topics, and he said, I think if we do this, I know this is counterproductive to what or counterintuitive to what I told you when I hired you on, because he brought me on to just fill in and not be Darkness Dave.
Yeah.
Talk
Yeah.
about everything but the paranormal, show my range.
Yeah. Do
And I
some
did
other
that
stuff.
for a year. Right. I did that for a year with him. He goes, if we do this, I want it to be a unique enough show that, it'll be appointment. People want to tune in to check it out. And he goes, so would you want to go into the paranormal again? And I said, sure. And he goes, let's play off the Paranormal 60 show that you're doing now, and the show will be a little bit more well-rounded, so we'll call it the Paranormal 360. And I said, okay. And we started that a month ago, and now that's live every Sunday night on WCCO radio in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And you can stream it anywhere. If you ask your smart device, hey Alexa, Sunday night, set alarm to 7 to 9 p.m. Central to play WCCO radio, and it'll fire off for you, and you can
Yeah.
listen to the podcast. And I talk to two different guests, one an hour, and we talk about different topics: time travel, reincarnation, spookiest places, all just kind of cool little offsets of one another, and discuss the possibilities. And that's been kind of the fun of it for me, is always an evolving and revolving door of entertaining guests and subjects to talk about.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. And your wife has a show now too, right?
Yeah, when I started with the Paranormal 60, I had two shows, one on Monday, one on Wednesday, both live at night. Um, And then I realized, I've got a lot of friends out there that are really having a fun show and doing stuff, and they may not be getting the same exposure that I'm getting after having done this for 16, 18 years at the time.
Yeah.
So Jeff Belanger and Ray Auger, who do, or Auger, that do New England Legends podcast. They jumped onto my network with me. So Monday nights or Mondays, you get to hear New England Legends. And that's anywhere from a 15-minute to 30-minute podcast. And they tackle a different legend and talk about what's the reality and such. Then on Tuesday nights, on the podcast, the audio version, you get my Paranormal 60.
Hmm.
Wednesdays, now we've got the Monsters Lounge with Tressa and Jenny,
Okay.
and they discuss anything from aliens to cryptids. Thursday, you get the Paranormal 60 news. And then Friday, you get True Hauntings podcast with Anne and Renata from Australia. And that's on our audio podcast. So that's the way it broke down. So we still had a couple days open, and my wife really wanted to do something with kind of true crime and mysteries, things that
Yeah.
I didn't want. I used to do a show called True Crime Tuesday,
Right.
and that just wore me down after a while. There's so much darkness, but
Yeah.
she lives for the true crime. So she took that over. So now she's on Sunday nights. You can go watch her podcast on YouTube as well. And then the audio podcast is released on the weekend. So you get 6 days of content from us. You get 5 days of paranormal and 1 day of true crime and mysteries. And that's kind of what we set up. So if you subscribe for free to the Paranormal 60, on whatever podcast platform you listen to, you'll get to hear all of those shows. So it gave everybody a chance to be heard and seen, and the people I love and care about, a way to kind of get out there and have a built-in audience.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so cool. And it's fun to see the growth from just the Paranormal 60 and see it bloom to all of these other shows and whatnot. So congratulations for now running your own
Thank you.
paranormal network as far as as far as podcasts go and
Thanks.
everything else. So it's really cool to see all of that and to see all of the different things, right? That
Hmm.
there are associated with that. So that's awesome. When you look back on all of these shows and all of the things that you've done, what's the first thing that kind of pops in your mind looking back at everything?
I just can't believe how fast time has gone. I mean, my daughter's going to be 18 this November, and I started my journey into paranormal radio 18 years ago. So it was January 1st, 2006. And like that, 18 years have gone by. And it's exciting, it's exhilarating, it's kind of weird to realize how fleeting time really is. And, sometimes it's a little melancholy because I will look back and see, the many amazing guests that I've had that are no longer walking this earth, from Jesse Marcel Jr. from the Roswell UFO incident to Stanton Friedman, the ufologist and nuclear physicist, and to Rosemary Ellen Guiley and so many others that we've lost over the last 18 years. But it's nice, I was the last person to do a radio interview with Dr. Hans Holzer.
Yeah.
And that's part of what opened the door for me to get into the Holzer Files TV show. So I really, I gave a voice to some people that maybe weren't being recognized or seen or heard as much, or not to the audience that I was directing to.
And we do miss a lot of those people. I know
Yeah.
I chatted with Rosemary Ellen Guiley a lot, and she actually, as far as spiritually goes, some of the things she's done, the work she's put out, and some of the things she said to me over MySpace, if anybody remembers MySpace,
Yeah.
she was on there, and I had a handful of conversations with her, and like just the things she had and the insights she had was always amazing. So yeah, definitely miss so many people. Um, you have a new book. This is your second book that you have
Hmm.
out, right? The
Yeah.
Theater of the Mind. Now, I may know a little bit about it, but tell our guests where the name comes from, kind of what the book is, and your thoughts on the process of this.
The funny kind of genesis point for me was during COVID. We had a lot of free time, and I sat down and started writing a book about myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I suffer anxiety and depression, and I deal with something called imposter syndrome, which is really a tough little insecurity to crack. So I was, I'd written well over half the book, and then I thought nobody's going to want to read this. This is so dumb. Nobody cares about your stories, and I was just like beating
Not true.
myself up over it. So I just threw it into a drawer and left it. And I had been writing with listeners these stories. They would send me in their stories, and we would present them on Darkness Radio as something called Theater of the Mind. So I would take your real life paranormal story, punch it up a little bit, just with grammar and fixing punctuation and adding elements so that we could add some sound effects. Instead of just saying, "Yeah, as I walked up the driveway," I would add things like, "As I walked up the driveway, the crunch of the rocks beneath my feet and the wind of the whistling of the
Yeah.
wind." That would give my producer something to create an ambiance while I was doing it. But I had all these, I've got like a couple hundred stories sitting in this drawer languishing. And I'm like, well, those aren't your stories. And everybody said, yeah, feel free if you ever want to use them in a book. So I reached out to a handful that I chose for the first book, and they were all on board. Go ahead. And the ones didn't want their names involved, I didn't use their names. We might change names to protect the innocent. And that's what I did. And then I threw in two of my own stories. So that way I could slowly ease into releasing my stuff and not feeling the pressure of, well, they're rejecting you. If they don't buy the book, they don't buy the book. But if it's a book about you specifically and they don't buy it, it feels a lot more personal. So I just figured I'll just weave them in. So the first book was Theater of the Mind, Tales from the Darkness, Ghosts, UFOs, Aliens, Monsters, and Other Strange Stories of the Supernatural. And that came out earlier this year. I have been working on book two. I was hoping to have book two out already, but it looks like it's probably going to come out in around October. And it'll be Theater of the Mind, and there'll be a different little subtitle
Okay.
to it. Each book will be called Theater of the Mind, and then a different subtitle. Creatures of the night, or things that go bump in the night, or whatever little rejoinder, and then they'll have different deals. But I didn't want the book to be specifically about ghosts,
Right.
because what we do and what we examine is so much bigger and broader. So in my book, I've got the Black Eyed Kids, the Bloody Bones Man, ghosts, aliens, time slip phenomena, phone calls from the dead, near death experiences, a haunted doll, haunted hospitals, a changeling from Ireland. So I really kind of, had a lot of great stories to work with and flesh it out. And it's 15 stories. I call it a great bathroom reader. You just take it in and set it on the cabinet next to the toilet, and you've got each one set for about a good sit down, and you, you can move on. So you don't have to remember what happened in chapter 3 to carry on. Each story is self-contained, and each story comes from a different person and a different perspective. But it's kind of neat when you look at all these stories, you realize, wow, I'm not alone. There are people
Yeah.
that are having experiences, and more than just one type of experience.
It's one of the things I always loved about your show. Even in the early days when people were calling in, all of the other
Mm-hmm.
people, somebody could tell a story that was just so far out there, and then you'd
Yeah.
get 300 people being like, "I had the same thing happen to me." And I know we talked about that a little bit, but before, but and I'll maybe talk about it later, but I also am one of those people where somebody came on and everybody's like, "That's so weird," but also, is it really that big? And I was like, no, it is, because that happened to me when I was a little kid. So it was
Right.
really cool to see that happen and hear you talk about it, but then to actually have it happen where somebody came on and told a story. And I think it might have been a Theater of the Mind as well episode that had happened. So yeah, those experiences, those stories are really awesome. I'm so glad that those people agreed to let you put those out there.
Well, a lot of
Was
them were it's kind of one of those things that a lot of people have these stories, these maybe one-off experiences in their life that they can't wrap their head around, and it's almost cathartic for them to share it with somebody who's
Yeah,
not going to mock them or ridicule them, not going to make them feel stupid for being vulnerable or open about this. So a lot of them wanted to share it. Like I said, when I reached back out and said, here is the cleaned up version of your story, can I release it this way? Some of them would say, well, I remembered this part of it was a little different, and when I talked to my brother, this is what he, so we adjust it to make sure that it was as accurate as possible. Like I said, there are some flourishes with the sound of the crunching stones under my feet while the wind whistled through the trees, and just little elements to kind of give you that theater of the mind. So it's not just
yeah.
words on a page, but playing out in your head, which is what I really love. I've got a lot of great reviews on Amazon, and people love that they kind of feel like they're being drawn into the story, that they become part of the story. And what more could an author ask for? So I, I'm really pleased to be a part of this. My other book I co-authored with Marley and Patrick Burns. Marley Gibson was the author of a young adult paranormal book series called The Ghost Huntress, and Patrick Burns had been featured on the TV show Haunting Evidence. And we were three friends, and we said, hey, let's get together over a weekend and just do kind of an easy manual on how to
Yeah.
ghost hunt, why we ghost hunt, what are we doing, how do you differentiate, evidence from false evidence. And we wanted to make it an easy read, because a lot of the books out there were, 2 inches thick
Right.
and so technical that you'd get bogged down in jargon and bored out of your mind trying to
It's a
read it.
college text.
Right. So we wanted to make it kind of a fun, like you and I are sitting down and I'm going over advice to give you
Yeah.
on how to start up your investigation. So we wrote that book, and I've been selling that for about 10 years, and people really, really seem to like that book and enjoy it. So it's been something that I've continually carried and make available at live events or through my website.
That's the other
So
side, correct?
yeah, the other side, a guide, it's a teen's guide to ghost hunting and the paranormal. However, they slapped the teen on the cover at the last second, trying to cash in on the Twilight market. It's written for everybody. It's just, I think, because it was simplistic, not dumbed down, but simplistic.
Yeah.
They felt better putting teen on it. I feel like that limited our audience a little bit, but adults, children, and teenagers alike have really enjoyed the book, and it's easy to digest. And I've even had some veteran ghost investigators that have been doing it for 20, 30 years that said, man, there's so many great points in here. I used to do these things and now I kick myself. Why aren't I doing this? And they were so glad to be reminded of some of the basics and the elements of how to do this. And so, I've been very proud of that. And I've got the books on my site. If you get Theater of the Mind off my website at Paranormal 60, it's $30 signed, or you can get it $20 unsigned. Then there's my book, the Other Side, which you can get for $20 signed on my website. So you can get both books as a nice little package for 40 and save $10. So that's something you can do by going to my website, paranormal60.com, and kind of scrolling down the front page. You'll see the package deal for 2 books there. But I don't want to turn it into an infomercial for
No,
that.
that's all
But
right. That's why we're having you on, so you can talk about
good.
some of this stuff so
Thank
people
you.
know.
Yeah, and I just love that, again. We get to share stories, and I don't want to give away any of the stories that are in this book necessarily, because I'd like you to read it. But when we first started talking about the Black Eyed Kids back in the day on Darkness Radio, we were one of, if not the first, paranormal program talking about the Black Eyed Kid phenomenon.
Yeah.
And we would get all of these remarkable stories that were coming into us from people around the world. And at first, I was very skeptical of it. I thought it sounded very urban legend, right? And as a perfect concept for an urban legend, this is one I grew up hearing, right? And I lived right near a place called Stratford Square Mall in Bloomingdale, Illinois, and that's where we always used to go hang out. And
Yeah.
then all of a sudden, this rumor started circulating that this woman had left the mall and went out to her car, and she got, put her stuff in the trunk, jumped in the driver's seat and turned, and there was this little old woman sitting in the passenger seat. And she was like, "What are you doing here?" And she's like, "Oh, I can't find my car and my son, and I don't know what I'm. Can you give me a ride home? I'm lost." And the woman just said, like, her spidey sense was tingling, and she was
Yeah.
so uncomfortable. And she's like, well, yeah, but I have to run back in real quick because I'm picking up something that they were getting for me out of layaway." And she goes, "Okay, well, I'll wait here." And she said, "Okay, I'll be right back." And the woman went in and got mall security, and mall security came out to the car, and they went up to the passenger side and opened the door and started talking to the little old lady. And when she refused to get out of the car, they eventually put hands on her and dragged her out of the car. When they dragged her out of the car, she was sitting on a hatchet, and it was a guy dressed as a little old lady. And man, that news spread all around our town and all through, the suburbs we lived in. And holy cow, there's no news story to prove that. There's nothing that ever happened. That becomes urban legend, right?
Yeah.
It's always those stories. Oh, well, my cousin's friend had that happen to them, or my
Right.
cousin's dog walker, right? So it's always kind of just close enough to be real, but not real. So that's what the Black Eyed Kid phenomena sounded like to me. And then I started getting some really interesting emails. Like I got this one from a woman. I want to say she was from the Philippines, or it might have been China. I apologize. It's been a while since I've read it, but
Yeah.
she had heard the Black Eyed Kids stories, and she was listening to one of our episodes about the Black Eyed Kids. And her grandmother came in and sat down and listened. And she said she just turned white and her mouth hung open. And she's like, "Oh my God, I think I had an experience with one of these where I was growing up." She goes, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Well, we used to share living quarters. So we all slept in the same room on these mats, with our blankets, our parents and my brothers and sisters." And she goes, "One night I woke up and my older brother, who was about 3 years older than her, was standing in the doorway waving for her, going, 'Come on, let's go out and play. Let's go play.'" She's like, "Our parents are going to be mad." He's like, "They're not going to wake up. Let's go play." So she finally relents, and she's the little sister thinking, "That's fine. I'll go play and I'll just blame it on him." So as she gets up and starts making her way and looking back at her parents, she trips and she looks down and she tripped over her brother, who's still sleeping. She looks back up at the door, and this boy is in the door smiling at her, waving for her, and his eyes are jet black. And other kids had gone missing in that village, and she's positive had she gone out with this boy, she would not have ever returned. She squealed and crawled back into her under her blankets, and was weeping, and she could hear him coming across the floor walking towards her, and she was sobbing and crying. And finally their father woke up and everything was fine. And she said that has stuck with her entire life. She's never talked about it. So when you hear stories like that, all of a
Yeah.
sudden it's not just because most of the stories we find are from like the late 1990s through today. And that's convenient, right? And I think it was
Right.
Brian Bethel who was the originator of the Black Eyed Kids stories. You can trace that moment to him. He's the one that I think called them the Black Eyed Kids.
Yeah.
So the stories, it turned, have always existed. People just didn't have a name for it.
Hmm.
And, kind of like Slender Man. Slender Man's a story that was created for an internet meme
Yeah.
and a contest, yet people had encounters with a being like this for centuries. There are old tales that have been told throughout different scripts and texts that talk about this long, tall, skinny being with no face.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of interesting and chilling to realize there are all of these other great stories that exist out there. And when you start hearing, Black Eyed Kids stories started coming to me at live events, I would have guys pull me aside and they're like, listen, I served in Desert Storm. I can't tell you where specifically I was, and I can't give you any of that information, but I can tell you that one night we woke up and this kid walked right into our deal, and they were really nervous because they used to strap bombs on kids and send them
Yeah.
in because I think the
Yeah.
kids, the adults and the soldiers would be more accepting of a kid, and he'd get in the midst of them and boom, the whole place would go. So they were worried that this kid was strapped with a bomb, and he was had jet black eyes and kept trying to get them to come with him, and they wouldn't go with, and within a day or two there'd be some huge tragedy. So it was like, is this thing a harbinger of death? Is it something that's a warning?
Right.
Don't know, but I loved hearing these, and I started hearing that from many different military personnel from many different places around the world, having encountered these things just before something substantially horrible took place.
I've always loved ever since you guys broke the news on the Black Eyed Kids and had David Weatherly on. I was like, I'm getting that book.
Yeah.
I got to read about all of the things Black Eyed Kids. And I've been fascinated by it ever since. And there's a handful of people that have had me come to talk to them about Black Eyed Kids. I'm like, well, this is like fourth hand. This is from what I've read from a book and heard from Dave on this show. This is what I know from, what I've read. I've never experienced it, but gosh, these are creepy things. Let me tell you about them.
Well, that's why I wanted to put them together in this book, because
Yeah.
these are firsthand accounts told to me, shared with me, so I can give you, here they are. This is the way it happened. This is the way it went down. These are the people that it affected and impacted. And then we'd hear other stories that would spin off of it, like the Black Eyed Kids led us to the Bloody Bones Man,
Yeah.
and stories like that. And the Bloody Bones Man, to kind of explain it, is imagine Freddy Krueger without the hat and without the striped sweater,
Yeah.
right? You
Yeah.
just see this man that looks like devoid of skin. It's just that muscly, sinewy, bloody look to him. And he has made his appearance known, kind of, he's the boogeyman.
Right.
And I started doing some research, and there legitimately was a being called the Bloody Bones Man in old, like, Dickensian literature. And they would talk about, he lived in the Harry Potter suite under your stairs, right? He had that
Right.
small little area where he'd be under the cabinets. And if you ever caught sight of him, he was usually sitting on a pile of bones of dead children that had lied and were bad to their parents. So you could tell there was definitely a moral story to the
Yeah.
deal. But again, was it based in a reality?
Yeah. Was it
Had
an actual
somebody
thing?
witnessed or seen this thing? Yeah. And people started sharing the stories of the Bloody Bones Man. And we've heard a lot of really creepy ones. This is one of my favorite ones, is in the book, and I've gotten some since. So I'll be sharing more as the books go. I've got probably enough to do about 10 books right now. If I put about 15 stories in each book. And those are just the really good stories. There are other stories I've got that maybe just don't have as much meat on them to, create a full flesh story. Maybe that'll be just one fun book that'll just be one page ghost stories and paranormal stories.
You made a post about this book on social media not too
Mhm.
long after it had come out, and I replied to it. Are we going to get a Dave Schrader audiobook narrated version of this book? And you said,
Yeah.
stay tuned. All right, I've been
Yeah.
staying tuned. Is there an update?
Here, yeah, it's tougher than it seems, right?
I know.
Because I'm working on the second book. I'm hosting 3 radio shows a week. I'm guesting on other people's radio shows. I'm filming a project that we're hoping will be out and maybe on TV next year.
Yeah, you're doing
Plus
conventions every weekend.
yeah, I do conventions almost every weekend during the year, and then I've got family that I have to be around. So
Yeah.
I just haven't had the chance, but I do plan on going in, sitting down and knocking out the book in an audiobook form and making that available as well. People seem to like my reading voice and inflection, so hopefully they'll enjoy that, and I'll have Theater of the Mind out here. Maybe I'll release both the first book in audiobook and the new second book in paperback
Ooh.
at the same time. So for people that are picking up the new paperback, they can go back and listen to the original book. And Theater of the Mind, the first book, Theater of the Mind Tales from the Darkness, is available in paperback form, or you can get it in electronic book form, Kindle form as well. So that's all on Amazon. And you should be able to buy it whatever country you live in. You just can't buy a signed copy unless you're in the United States. Or I'll be out in England in September at the Festival of the Unexplained, and your listeners can check out festivaloftheunexplained.com. It is the only time that Shane Pittman, Cindy Keza, and myself from the Holzer Files will be in Europe together doing a conference. So it's the only Holzer Files UK event we'll be at this year. And I will have copies of my book there. I'll be signing and selling as well.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna turn the tables on you. You've
Okay.
historically said and asked this question to people on your shows throughout the years.
Mm-hmm.
What do you hope people get out of this book from reading it?
I really hope that it brings in a sense of peace and community. I hope that it makes people feel not so alone. People that have had a fascination with it or have had their own experiences. There are many people that deal with depression and anxiety because they think they're crazy for having had this happen to them. And now here's a chance to read 15 other people that have had similar and maybe even stranger, more absurd experiences. So my hopes really was kind of like we do on the show. I want it to be a safe space for you to come and maybe get a little scared, maybe make you think a little bit more, and maybe educate you on the concept that there's a lot more going on in the world that we're living in than meets the eye. And if we could get our faces out of our, cell phones and tablets once in a while and start paying attention, there's a lot of really cool magic that exists around us. And I hope people start to take note of it.
That's awesome. Awesome. Quote me on
Thank
that. That's awesome.
you. Yeah,
You're
and
gonna
I
be a
will
lot.
ask
Go ahead.
if anybody has bought the book already and you liked it, please go rate and review it on Amazon
Yeah.
or Goodreads, because it really helps authors a lot when you rate and review their books. So if you like the book, please rate and review it. If you didn't like the book, just keep it to yourself. Nobody needs your
Yeah. Still
negativity.
give it a 5 star and a 5 star rate and review. Say how
No.
awesome
I'd never say that. Just give me an honest rating and review. That's all I ask.
it is. Who's going to be your guest tonight? You're going to be live later on tonight, Paranormal 60, 9 o'clock p.m. Central. Who's your guest? Tell us about the show.
Well, tonight, yeah, we're going to talk about space-time slips. A guest that's coming on, Anita, and her name is escaping me off the top of my head right now. I apologize. I'm still a little or not
Yeah.
COVID, but convention fogged from the weekend, being up late and getting up early every day from the Gettysburg Battlefield Bash.
It's been a year since I've had COVID, and I still get brain fog. It's maybe even 2 years now since that, and I still get brain fog and issues.
Well,
So
I don't have COVID. I meant to say convention brain fog, not COVID.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, I know you have had it in the past.
Yeah.
I had it, and it's been a while, and I'm still suffering those effects. So yeah.
So tonight we're going to talk about the strange time slip phenomena, these moments of lost time, found time, just how weird and malleable and pliable time is. And our guest is a former teacher who has been experiencing strange things and gathering these stories and experiences. She's written 2 books. So tonight my show is live 9 to 10 p.m. Central. And again, you can watch it over on the Paranormal 60 YouTube channel. And we're going to have a good conversation, and we'll take some of your questions from the audience. And, I just ask, go over there, subscribe, hit the little bell, and, never miss any of the content that we put out on the program.
Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. I will definitely hop
Thanks.
in there and watch and listen. Usually I listen to the replays when I get time, but I'm going to force out some time tonight to make sure that I'm there live for tonight's event. So
I appreciate that.
You've got an event pretty much every weekend for the rest of your life. You can see it all on paranormal60.com. All the events. You're going to be at the Para Rock Amex on August 3rd in Madison, Wisconsin. Benton County Historical Expo.
It's Para Rock the Annex.
And
it's in Madison, Wisconsin this coming weekend, Saturday night or Saturday all day. There's paranormal conference, and then there's rock and roll music all night. Some great local Wisconsin bands that'll be playing. So it's a cool mixture of rocking out with our ghost out, right? So we're gonna doing all kinds of fun paranormal stuff. We've got a couple of the guys from 28 Days Haunted, and I will be on site, and there are going to be some ghost hunts and presentations, and I'll be there signing books and autographs and hanging out. And then the week after that, I'm in Vinton, Iowa, and I'll be there with Jeff Belanger, Josh Hurd, and we will be doing. I think it's our first annual paranormal conference. They've done it over a couple of different years, but
Yeah.
this is their first release of this new version, and we're gonna have a great time. I really loved it last year. We had a great chance to explore and investigate, and then I've got my event that's coming up at the Palmer House Hotel in Sauk Center. I'm going to be out at the amazing Michigan Paracon this year. The Great Lakes Paranormal Conference is coming up as well. So there's so many places. Just check out darknessevents.com. Darknessevents.com. And that'll outline all the events I'll be at this year and the ones that go into next year.
That's awesome. And you're going to be on the cruise again, the Jericho cruise, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I'm
You going to
excited
summon
about
some
that.
UFOs this time again?
I'm hoping. I don't know what I'm going to do this time. I've got a lot of cool ghost stories and tales I'm going to be telling, and other strange paranormal phenomena. So usually they have me do a campfire tale on the last night, where they literally at the back of the ship they put together this little fake campfire for me, and they put all these rows. And I've had several hundred people come out to the back of the ship. I'm surprised we're not tipping it backwards. Right. But we all load up back there, and it's fun because a lot of the wrestlers and celebrities and musicians come out to hear the ghost stories. You know, I had the last one I was at, Chris Jericho and his entire family were out there listening to the stories. And afterwards, Chris, you know, that was my third one I'd done with them,
Right.
third or fourth one. And now I'm on the 6 on the Beach cruise. It's called 6 on the Beach because this is their 6th cruise. Yeah. And he's like, Dave, you are welcome on every cruise until I stop doing them. You're my paranormal guy, so I appreciate that. So you can come for a weekend of it's like 4 days of rock and roll, wrestling, and the paranormal, podcasts and comedy. All of this great stuff's going to be taking place. They've got a lot of really big name people and celebrities. You can go to chrisjerichocruise.com. That's chrisjerichocruise.com and find out all the information.
That's amazing. YouTube.
Just do me a favor. Yeah. If you sign up and you're going to go, they'll give you a little drop-down box. You know, why are you coming? Just drop down. They're already going to get a lot of people for Chris Jericho. Drop down until you find the Paranormal 60 or Dave Schrader and click that so they know that you heard about it from me. That helps me too, so that they make sure to keep bringing me back.
They're going to keep bringing you back. You're amazing.
Thank you.
I don't think that there's ever going to be a problem with that. The Paranormal 60 on YouTube. You're on X/Twitter at the Dave Schrader, and Instagram at official Dave Schrader as well. So you guys can go and find him on those social medias. You can just a Google search. He'll show up, guys. Be top of your list right there on the Google search.
Thank you.
People watching the live stream, please stick around. We'll do a Q&A session coming up here, just a short little one. So if you have questions for Dave, please throw them in the chat and we'll grab through a couple of those. Coming up, we're going to have Renee Giddings from the video game Potions, A Curious Tale. She's a game designer. She's going to come and join us talking about women in the video game industry and her story as far as her game and getting that out there and everything that happened. That whole game went viral. And I wanted to get her on the show and support that. We're also going to have voice actor Mark Meir coming on. Award-winning author Olivia Blake is going to be coming and joining us. So many more people. So please, please, please stick around. Join, like, subscribe, click all the buttons, follow all the things. It helps us and in turn helps our guests. Of course, don't forget to go get Theater of the Mind by Dave Schrader right now. Anywhere you get your books, paranormal60.com. For Dave Schrader, I am Nick, and I want to say thank you all for listening to Epic Realms.